Good morning. BirdLife Malta welcomes you to Simar Nature Reserve, a small jewel, a small wetland located in Xemxija Bay. We're doing this live Facebook transmission as part of our On the Move campaign, in which we are promoting the beauty of migration. So this morning we'll show you a bit around this nature reserve so that you'll get an idea of how and why it is important to birds which breed here, and also for migratory birds. So started and start walking along the nature trail. L-għodwa tajba, dal-għodu qegħdin hawnhekk fir-riserva naturali tas-Simar li tinstab fil-bajja tax-Xemxija. Qed nagħmlu dan il-Facebook live transmission bħala parti mill-kampanja li l-BirdLife qiegħda tagħmel On the Move. On the Move jiġifieri l-għasafar qegħdin on the move. Qed nagħmluha biex inġibu iktar kuxjenza u biex nagħtu informazzjoni fuq is-sbuħija tal-migrazzjoni tal-għasafar. Imma dil-migrazzjoni x'inhi, kemm, meta u kif ipassu l-għasafar hawn Malta? Mela, hawn Malta l-għasafar ipassu darbtejn f'sena. Ġi aħna jkollna il-passa tal-ħarifa u l-passa tar-rebbija li propju qegħdin fiha bħalissa. L-għasafar fir-rebbija ikunu tilejn il-fuq lejn l-Ewropa. Għalfejn għax ikunu qattaw żmien twil fl-Afrika, bażikament ix-xitwa jkunu qattawha fl-Afrika, meta ovvjament l-Ewropa ta' fuq tkun kesħet u issa tkun letteralment telli għal fuq biex l-għasafar isibu l-aqwa postijiet fejn ħajmorru bejtu. Fil-ħarifa, il-kontra, ikun hemm il-frieħ li jkunu għadhom kemm faqsu l-adulti li meta tiksaħ l-Ewropa jagħmlu l-vjaġġ lura l-isfel lejn l-Afrika fejn isibu iktar ikel u temp iktar sħun. So, we're here to celebrate the On the Move campaign, which focuses on bird migration. Malta's lucky in the sense that we get to witness bird migration twice in a year, in spring and in autumn. In spring, which is the season obviously we are currently in, birds would be moving from Africa up to Europe to their breeding grounds. In autumn, after they have nested in Europe, and after the weather gets cold and therefore food sources start getting scarcer, birds migrate south so that they find warmer climates and obviously more food. And that is where Malta plays an important role. What we have here at Simar Nature Reserve is that the importance, apart from importance for birds, Simar Nature Reserve is also a very important educational tool, which is why our nature trail has these areas, these pockets of space where children and adults alike can learn about the different inhabitants of the nature reserve, including, for example, the dragonfly, which, once we're talking about migration, maybe few people know that dragonflies and butterflies and moths actually migrate in the Maltese Islands. Naqleb naqra bil-Malti, qed nitkellmu li r-riserva minn barra li hija importantissima għall-għasafar hija importanti wkoll għall-edukazzjoni. Hawnhekk ir-riserva tkun miftuħa għan-nies, is-iktar tard intukom il-ħinijiet, u għandna dawn l-erja żgħar fejn fihom in-nies ikunu jistgħu, it-tfal speċjalment ikunu jistgħu jifqu b'xi hands-on, b'xi affarijiet li jistgħu jilagħbu bihom bħal dawk it-tabelli li rajn hemmhekk, isiru jafu fuq l-annimali li jkunu fir-riserva fosthom, pereżempju il-frifet. Tajjeb li ftit minn nies jafu li l-frifet ipassu wkoll, il-frifet li għandna fil-Gżejjer Maltin. Issa li ħanamlu wkoll hawnhekk illum bħala parti minn xogħolna, minn xogħol il-BirdLife, bħala parti mill-immaniġjar tar-riserva u parti mir-riċerka li nagħmlu, aħna hawnhekk nistudjaw l-għasafar li jbejtu hawnhekk. Minn dawk l-iktar rari forsi li jbejtu bħat tiġiġa tal-baħar għal dawk l-iktar komuni bħal bufula sewda li ħanaraw illum. Il-bufula sewda hija sfur komuni kif qed ngħidu li jinstab b'ħafna postijiet anke f'ġonna pubbliċi u forsi fil-ġonna jew fil-btieħi tan-nies fejn hemm naqra siġar u ħdura. Hawnhekk li nagħmlu nipprovaw insibu il-bejti ta' dan l-asfur biex aħna l-asafar minn meta jkunu frieħ fil-bejta nkunu nistgħu nistudjaw il-ċiklu tal-ħajja kollu tagħhom minn bażikament l-ewwel ġurnata li faqsu. What we'll be doing today as part of the research work we do at Simar Nature Reserve and actually at all our nature reserves is to monitor the breeding birds in the respective reserves. Today we'll be having a look at one of the commonest birds which breeds here, the Sardinian warbler. As I said, it's a common bird which is found also in quite a lot of public gardens and even private gardens. Here we'll actually have a picture of the male bird. So it's a small bird, particularly the male has a black head, whilst the female has a dark grey head. What we do is we locate as much as possible the nests of the species so that we can get to study the young, what food the young are given, because this is all important data which then helps us draw up a management plan for the area of the nature reserve. For example, as you can see along the path we have a lot of olive trees which are actually overgrown with other plants like the spiny asparagus. Some people might say, but why not clean up the olive trees so that they're nice olive trees? In a nature reserve, nature takes precedence. So that in itself is actually a habitat, as we will see, for the nesting Sardinian warbler. Qed nitkellmu naqra fuq l-abitat ta' dan l-asfur. Tajjeb, forsi ftit minn nies jiġu hawn jaraw da s-siġar ta' żebbuċ jgħidu imma m'għax telqa għandhom għax ma jinżabbrux, l għandhom ispraċ tiela magħhom taħt. Da kollu hawnhekk ġo riserva naturali, isimha magħha, riserva naturali, ġi aħna inżommu l-post naturali kemm jista'. U l-asafar hekk għandhom bżonn propju biex ibejtu. Imxu miegħi ħalli naraw naqra l-ewwel bejta li għandna hawnhekk. Mela din il-bejta li tinstab propju hawnhekk fiha ġiex tifriħ li llum għandhom qisu mad-9 tiem u bajda waħda li sfortunatament ma faqsitx. Dawn l-asafar inkunu irringjajnihom kif ħanarukom iktar tard iġru waħħanilhom ċurket tal-skop xjentifiku. Issa nitkellmilkom iktar tard. This nest here currently has 2 young birds around 10 days old. It also has 1 egg which unfortunately did not hatch. The birds are fed regularly by both the male and the female bird, but let's move away from the nest to give it its space and we can talk as we walk along. The nest of the Sardinian warbler is constructed by both the male and the female bird. So they take time, they take the work, both of them, to construct the nest. Once constructed, it is the female which actually takes the time to do a softer inner lining which will permit her to lay the eggs. Eggs are laid at a day's interval, so literally an egg a day is laid, and normally a normal clutch has 4 eggs, though sometimes we find a few nests with 2, 3 and quite exceptional with 5 eggs. After 2 weeks in which both parents take turns in incubating, the birds hatch. Once they hatch, it is a coming and going all the time, providing food for the young birds which take 14 days to leave the nest. And the work is not done once the birds leave the nest, because the adults accompany the young birds for quite a long time to be sure that they're ready to fend on their own. Il-pufula sewda, kemm ir-raġel u kemm il-mara huma involuti fil-bini tal-bejta. Il-bini tal-bejta li ssir mit-tnejn li huma, imma l-mara li mbagħad tagħmel l-irtokki finali fil-bejta qabel ma tbit il-bajt. Il-mara tbit bajda kuljum u normalment bejta tal-bufula sewda ikollha 4 bajdiet għalkemm ġieli issib bejtiet b'2, 3 u rarament anke 5 bajdiet. Kemm ir-raġel u kemm il-mara joqogħdu fuq il-bejta biex isaħħnu l-bajt, proċess li jdum 15 biex il-bajt ifaqqas. Meta jfaqsu l-frieħ, mbagħad il-raġel u l-mara ġejjin u sejrin il-ħin kollu bl-ikel. Ikel li jvarja minn friefet, minn brim, pirqiq, tajjeb, dejjem insetti. Wara 15, iż-żar ikunu lesti biex jitilqu mill-bejta. La darba jitilqu mill-bejta x-xogħol tal-ġenituri jkun għadhom ma spiċċax għax għandhom mill-inqas numru ta' ġranet oħra biex jibqgħu mal-frieħ biex ikunu ċerti li l-frieħ jistgħu jfendu għal rashom. Hawnhekk għandna bejta oħra li qed niċċekkjaw. Il-bejtiet għandhom diversi nsejħulhom fin-natura, edewwa. Imma meta l-bejta tkun bil-bajt, is-serb, is-sriep li hawn li mhumiex perikolużi għall-bnedmin mhuwiex komuni, huwa komuni anzi li xi serb jieħu l-bajt tal-bejta. U meta jfaqsu l-frieħ huwa komuni wkoll anke xi kamaleonte. Meta jkun hemm il-frieħ għadhom żgħar jiċċaqalqu fil-bejta jitħajjar. So we have another nest here. This nest has 4 eggs, so we'll take note of that and record it. As I said before, it takes 9 days for the eggs to hatch. Have a number of predators. It is nature after all. And when in this stage, when there are the eggs, it is not uncommon for the snakes, none of which are dangerous for humans, to predate a nest. Once the eggs hatch, it is not uncommon for a chameleon to actually predate the young in the nest. Obviously, there are other predators like cats and maybe dogs, which can actually attack the adult birds, especially when they're incubating the nest. The young in the nest and the amount of food that these young birds need leads us to this common sort of dilemma which we face. Many people often visit the reserve and say, but why is it in this state of abandon? Why are there all these grasses, these bad weeds running around? Well, there is no such thing as bad weeds in a nature reserve, because all these grasses are providing food for butterflies, for them to lay eggs, for the caterpillars, which eventually will become food for the birds. So it is very important that, as I've said before, we are the visitors here. This is nature's home, and therefore nature takes precedence, even when it comes to these grasses. Qed nitkellmu naqra fuq il-kelma li tant il-Maltin iħobbu l-imbirka ħaxix ħażin. Għax ġieli konna nies li jirramarkaw jgħidu ma hawnhekk fil-passaġġ mad-dawra għalfejn dal-ħaxix ħażin kollu. U qed ngħidu li f'riserva naturali m'hemm xejn li aħna nsejħu ħaxix ħażin għax huwa kollu importanti għalfejn, importanti għal friefed biex ibitu għal brimp li dawn huma mbagħad l-istess annimali li l-asafar se jużaw biex waqt il-migrazzjoni u biex jitimgħu il-frieħ tagħhom ser jieklu. Issa, nifokaw fuq il-migrazzjoni, ħanrukom naqra il-bird ringing. Il-bird ringing huwa proċess li numru ta' nies trejnjati u liċenzjati jagħmlu biex ikun nistudjaw l-asafar. Bażikament li ħanamlu ser nidħlu fil-bird ringing station biex norikom naqra kif isir il-proċess. Aħna nkunu fortunati li llum għandna xi asafar biex nirringjaw. Allura ħanarawa live, però xtaqt norikom kif jibda l-proċess, kif qedtilkom dal-grupp ta' nies liċenzjati għandhom permess jużaw dawk li jgħidulhom mist nets li huma xbiek li jitpoġġew bejn is-siġar u li fihom għasfur li jkun qed jaqsam bejn is-siġar jinqabad ġo qisu pocket u mbagħad ir-ringer li jkollu l-esperjenza mingħajr ma jweġġa l-asfur joħorġu barra mix-xibka. We're about to see the bird ringing process, And this is the start of the bird ringing process, in which a number of licensed bird ringers who would have done a minimum of 2 years of training would use mist nets. Mist nets are vertical nets, basically, which are placed in between trees. The birds fly and get stuck in a pocket within the net. The nets are constantly supervised by the bird ringer, and the birds are immediately extracted and taken to the ringing station. Tkellimna wkoll fuq il-bufula sewda u waraw il-bird ringing fejn jidħol kemm interessanti. Hawnhekk għandna bufula sewda infaqsa ġewwa riserva tas-Simar. Dan l-asfur bil-bird ringing waħħajn ilu ċurket l-ewwel darba fit-13 ta' Lulju tal-2005. Inqabad l-asfur 23 darba, l-aħħar darba fl-2015, meta l-asfur kellu 10 snin. Mhux xajt qed ngħidu asfur żgħir li rnexxielu jagħmel 10 snin hawnhekk. We're having a look at some of the interesting data which bird ringing gives us. We spoke and saw the nest of the Sardinian warbler. In this case, we have a Sardinian warbler which was fitted with a bird ring in July of 2005 and retrapped the last time in 2015, a full 10 years after. Naturally, migration. We spoke about migration and birds moving north and moving south and the importance of Malta. And this map probably is the map which clearly shows the importance Malta plays in bird migration. These here are all birds which have been found at Simar Nature Reserve, either carrying rings from foreign countries or vice versa. That means birds ringed at Simar have been found in other countries. And it's fascinating when one looks at some of the common birds, for example the barn swallow, the huttafa, which is quite common at this time of the year. And when we look at the map, you can see that we tie our barn swallows to countries like Norway, Belgium, Italy, Croatia. Incredible for such a bird, for such journeys. Tkellimna fuq il-migrazzjoni tal-asafar u f'din mappa hija bellezza minħabba li jom dawn kollha huma safar li twaħlilhom ċurket barra minn Malta jew is-Simar u nstabu s-Simar jew viċeversa. Ġvija huwa safar, anka safar komuni bħal huttafa li bħalissa forsi kulħadd ikollu l-fortuna li jara xewqtajiet sbieħ tagħhom. Asfur tal-ġen għax huwa ta' benefiċċju kbir għax jikol ħafna nemus. U naraw kif dil ħuttafa bil-bird ringing, il-ħuttaf tas-Simar norbtuhom ma' pajjiżi bħal Norveġja, bħal Belgium, bħal Italja u bħal Kroazja. U għandna safar bħal violin ħadrani, safrani, skużawni, asfur żgħir, bażikament, li tala anka saħansitra f'pajjiż bħal l-Iżvezja. Wieħed mill-iktar pajjiżi li qiegħed fin-nord tal-Ewropa. Ejja ħalli nimxu issa u naraw naqra x'għandna l-bird ringing. Mela, l-asafar wara li jinqalaw mill-mistnet tajjeb jitpoġġew ġo dawn il-boros. Jitpoġġew ġo dawn il-boros li huma materjal li l-asfur ovvjament jieħu nnifs minnhom. U jitpoġġew hemmhekk sakemm aħna nġibuhom hawnhekk fir-ringing station biex inwaħħlulhom iċ-ċurkett. So once the birds are caught in the mistnet, they are placed in these bird bags. They are placed here because these bags, air goes through them and the bird can basically wait until it is processed in the ringing station. As a first bird this morning, we have a sedge warbler. A beautiful bird whose habitat is actually that of a wetland. Therefore, the water's edge with reeds there and vegetation there, where it stays close to the ground and looks for insects. When it comes to bird ringing, we have obviously different ring sizes, as you can see, and the ring size we use depends on the type of bird we have. Each ring has a unique number and BirdLife Malta's address on it. So basically, once the ring will be fitted, this will be the bird's identity card, call it that way. 87. Mela, iċ-ċurkett għandna daqsijiet differenti ta' ċrieket. Iċ-ċurkett jitwaħħal luż mas-sieq, kif tista' tara ċ-ċurkett jitlaw jinżel jiġi l-asfur ma jdejqux, pjuttost bħal ċurkett tal-lina. Fih numru uniku dan iċ-ċurkett, uniku, m'hemmx numru ieħor bħalu, l-indirizz ta' BirdLife Malta biex meta l-asfur jintelaq u jekk alla jrid jinqabad f'pajjiżi barra minn Malta nkunu nistgħu nikkorrispondu u nġibu d-dettalji tiegħu. Daqsijiet ta' ċrieket ovvjament hawn differenti jiddependi mid-daqs tal-asfur. Mela wara li nikdbu in-numru ta' ċurkett u l-ispeċi, nieħdu li jmiss id-daqs tal-ġewnaħ. Tajjeb kemm hu twil il-ġewnaħ. 67. F'dan il-każ 67 mm, 67 mm. Tajjeb, nieħdu wkoll hemm kodiċi ta' kemm l-asfur għandu xaħam u muskolu. U dan il-birdringer jaraħ billi nonfħu bil-mod fuq sider l-asfur. Da l-asfur ma tantx għandu xaħam u ma tantx għandu muskolu. Part importanti wkoll barra l-identifikazzjoni tal-asfur huwa li naraw huwiex possibbli naraw kemm għandu żmien dal-asfur huwiex raġel jew mara. Imma mhux l-asafar kollha jintarfu. Dan pereżempju ma jintarafx ir-raġel u l-mara, ma tarfux bejn ir-raġel u l-mara. U laqqas f'da żmien tas-sena ma nkunu nistgħu ngħidu huwiex ferħ, jiġifieri asfur li faqqas is-sena l-oħra, jew adult, jiġifieri asfur li għandu iktar minn sena. F'dan il-każ li jonqosna nagħmlu huwa li niżnu l-asfur u l-asfur niżnuh billi nagħmluh ġo dan il-bot. L-asfur xorta qiegħed jieħu nifs. Niżnuh 9.6. Dan l-asfur jiżen 9.6 grams. Tajjeb, huwa pis pjuttost ħafif, allura iċ-ċansiż huma li dal-asfur ser qatta ftit tiġranet hawn fejn jiekol iżid ix-xaħam biex imbagħad ikun jista' jitlaq lejn l-Ewropa. U issa nistgħu nħallu l-asfur jitlaq. Mela, naraw x'għandna iktar. Jekk xi ħadd għandu xi mistoqsijiet li jrid jistaqsi, kunu liberi biex tibatuhom. If anyone has any questions, feel free to send them, we'll willingly answer. We have another similar bird, another sedge warbler. It is one of the common birds at this time of the year, especially in an area like Simar Nature Reserve, because this is precisely its habitat, basically. So we fit the ring. It's very important to stress that the ring is very, very light and loose on the bird's leg so that it will not affect it in any way. Next measurement we take, once more, is the wing. This is a slightly larger bird. The wing is 69 millimeters. We have We have a fat and muscle score table. Basically, by blowing softly under at the belly, we can know what kind of fat reserves and muscle this bird has. This particular bird has no fat whatsoever, so it is highly likely that this bird will spend a few days in the nature reserve where it will replenish its food. We take a look at the plumage conditions, and then we weigh the bird. The bird is can still obviously breathe whilst it's in (11 grams). Despite having less fat reserves than the other bird, this bird is slightly, and the bird can then leave. It seems it's liking the attention. There it goes. So we have the final bird for this morning. So this is an important part of the research work which BirdLife Malta carries out. It's important again to stress the proper training that bird ringers need to take in order to get the license, for various reasons: for properly identifying the birds and for handling them in a correct manner, so that no harm is obviously wreaked to the bird. Okay, here we have a different species. This is a local, this is not a migratory bird. It is the Satis warbler. It is a local bird which breeds here. It is unringed, so this is likely a bird looking to set up a new territory, because as I told you before, it is a local breeding bird. Dan l-asfur li għanna hawnhekk mhuwiex asfur tal-passa, huwa asfur li jibqgħu Malta, li jbejjed Malta, il-bal tal-Olliq. Dan l-asfur, għad-differenza tal-asafar ta' qabel, nistgħu nkunu nafu l-età tiegħu kif ukoll huwiex raġel jew mara, u dan nkunu nafu mid-daqs tal-ġewnaħ u l-pis tiegħu. Mela, dan l-asfur għandu ġewnaħ ta' 54 ta' 54 mm li tfisser minħabba li d-daqs huwa żgħir li din hija mara. Ovvjament minħabba li dan mhuwiex asfur tal-passa, xaħam huwa diffiċli li nsibulu, imma xorta niċċekkjaw għax jekk dan l-asfur ikun bil-bejta, l-asafar iwaqqgħu ir-rix tas-sider biex iżommu l-bajt sħan meta jkunu qegħdin fuq il-bejta. So this bird, the Satis warbler, is not a migratory bird, and unlike the previous bird, we can determine the age and the sex of this bird. The sex of the bird is determined by the size of the wing. This particular bird has a wing of 54, which means that this bird is a female. The male is generally larger. Okay, we have a question which says sort of how can a person become a bird ringer and what is the training processes. To do that, the person needs to get in touch with BirdLife Malta, either through our webpage or email info@birdlifemalta.org, and we will contact you to let you know the training program, what the training program entails. Biex bniedem isir bird ringer qed nirrispondu għax kellna domanda. wieħed ikellem lil BirdLife Malta jista' jidħol fuq il-website tagħna jew jibgħat email fuq info@birdlifemalta.org u bil-qalb kollha aħna nuruh u nispjegaw il-proċess biex bniedem isir bird ringer. Mela, niżnu l-asfur. U l-asfur titlaq. Dan l-asfur jiżen 10 grammi kollox. The bird weighs 10.5 grams. Okay, so that is part of the research we do at the Nature Reserve, but it's not all. Another important aspect we do is we study the food source which birds find. To this end, covered by the appropriate ERA Environment Resources Authority Nature Permit, we carry out a study which we'll show you here, through which we try to determine the species of the moths found at the Nature Reserve. Few people maybe know, I didn't know myself to be very honest, that there are hundreds of species of moths which migrate to the Maltese Islands. So as part of this study, we set up this moth trap, basically, and in the morning we take photos of the moths which we find. My colleague here is taking pictures of the moths. We are, thanks to this collaboration we have a local expert who is capable of identifying all the moth species, basically, which we find. There's another interesting one, and the most important thing is that not only do we identify the species of the moth, but we are given information as to the type of vegetation which the moth requires, because moths are particular and they require particular vegetation. That helps us draw up the management plan for the area, so it helps us determine what type of vegetation we need to plant more, what type of vegetation is more important than other for the moth species. Ħanejdilkom naqra x'inhi tagħmel il-kollega tiegħi hawnhekk. Bħala parti mir-riċerka li nagħmlu aħna niffokaw fuq kollox. U hawnhekk qed naraw l-ispeċi ta' moths li jinstabu fir-riserva tas-Simar. Dan ix-xogħol huwa kollu kopert mill-permess tal-ERA, permess ambjentali, li fih darba fil-ġimgħa nagħmlu dan l-istudju biex aħna niddeterminaw xi speċi ta' moths jinstabu hawnhekk. Għandna espert lokali li kapaċi b'ritratt jidentifika l-ispeċi kollha u iktar importanti huwa jgħidilna x'tip ta' ħaxix u veġetazzjoni dak il-mod partikolari għandu bżonn biex jgħix. U għalfejn huwa importanti da? Huwa importanti għax jagħti il-moths u l-caterpillars tagħhom jagħtu l-ikel tajjeb lill-frieħ tal-asafar u lill-asafar waqt il-migrazzjoni. Importanti ngħidu li l-ebda animal ma jinħaqar jew jinqatel waqt dan il-proċess ovvjament u l-moths jitilqu fil-libertà. It's important to say that obviously no moth or other animal is killed during any of our research work which we carry out at the Nature Reserve. So we spoke about the nests, and I think it's very important to mention a few things. BirdLife Malta, as part of the Spring Alive project work, is also giving information about how should we protect bird nests, and this is especially the case for the common Spanish sparrow. In a few weeks' time, we start getting a lot of queries as to listen, we found a young bird, what should we do, how should we do that? It's very simple. Never take a young bird away from the nest. Two important steps: just be sure that there are no predators around, and put the bird possibly in a higher place, away from predators, away from dogs, away from cats, away from anything which can harm the bird, but leave it on site, because it is highly likely, actually it is definite, that the parents would still be monitoring the young bird and feeding it. We can also help obviously by building nest boxes, and it's very important to know that what we did here this morning with the nests is part of a research project. So if ever you come across a nest when you're out trekking or you're out walking, please keep a safe distance and do not disturb the nest, because the parents would be quite susceptible to such disturbance. Qed nitkellmu naqra fuq proġett ieħor li l-BirdLife hija involuta, li huwa dan il-Spring Alive, li dis-sena t-tema tiegħu hija kif nistgħu ngħinu l-għasafar li qegħdin ibejtu. U aħna qed nitkellmu l-iktar fuq l-għasafar il-komuni bħall-għasafar tal-bejt hawnhekk. Tajjeb, bħalissa jkollna ħafna domandi, isma' sib ta' sfur ferħ ta' sfur tal-bejt viċin il-bejt, se nagħmel nieħdu nrabbieħ, nista' nitimgħu, xejn minn da. Ġiex affarijiet biss li għandna bżonn nagħmlu bażikament huwa li l-asfur nżommuh f'post fejn huwa safe, ġviri l-bot minn fej jista' jinqabad minn xi qattus jew jitaffeċ minn xi bniedem jew jinħataf minn xi kelb, tajjeb, u nħallu d-distanza ħalli l-ġenituri jiġu u jitimgħuh. Għax ma tantx taħdem u ma tantx tgħin li nieħdu l-għasafar biex nipprovaw irrabbuhom għalkemm l-intenzjoni tkun tajba, in-natura nħallu għaliha hemm il-ġenituri tiegħu biex jieħdu ħsieb. Mela, nistgħu wkoll jekk tixtiequ intukom naqra idea tal-riserva biex tieħdu idea ta' xaw fir-riserva bażikament, x'tistgħu taraw meta tiġu hawn. Tkellimna qabel fuq il-ħinijiet tal-ftuħ. Sfortunatament bħalissa riserva magħluqa ħabba l-COVID. Qed nisperaw fingers crossed li l-11 ta' April forsi l-sitwazzjoni titjieb inkunu nistgħu niftħu l-bibien għall-pubbliku. Hawnhekk bħala riserva nhar ta' tlieta u nhar ta' ġimgħa, riserva tkun miftuħa wara nofsinhar mis-satejn sa filgħaxija. Dħul huwa dejjem b'xejn. Il-ħadd imbagħad tinfetaħ bil-ħiniet tal-10 ta' filgħodu u tal-4 ta' wara nofsinhar. L-Adira wkoll li hija riserva l-oħra li għandna tiftaħ ukoll darbtej fil-ġimgħa, it-tnejn u l-ħamis. U mbagħad fil-weekend tiftaħ is-sibt u l-ħadd, dejjem l-istess ħinijiet. Fil-weekend bej l-10 u l-4 u t-tnejn u l-ħamis mis-satej sa filgħaxija. Għandna żewġ siti oħra importanti, għandna l-Forest 2000 li hija proġett ta' forestazzjoni l-Melliħa li da miftuħ 24/7 il-ħin kollu. Ġbir bniedem jista' jmur hemm passiġġjata, hemm ħafna siġar warbuxelli mħawlin, post verament għall-kwiet. Għandna wkoll ir-riserva tas-Salina fejn hemm is-Salt Pens li hemmhekk ukoll miftuħa kuljum matul il-ġimgħa fejn bniedem jista' jimxi u jara informazzjoni fuq il-proċess ta' kif kien isir u għadu u ħajibda jsir il-melħ, bażikament kif ukoll li gawdi l-għasafar li jkun hemm jistrieħu fil-post. Issa ħanittawlu naqra kif tistgħu taraw. So we were talking about Simar Nature Reserve and how can the public enjoy the nature reserve. Unfortunately, at the moment, due to COVID, we are closed. But we're hoping that come the 11th April, maybe we receive the good news that we can once more open our gates to the public. The reserve is open twice a week, on Tuesdays and on Fridays from 2 in the afternoon till late evening. Entrance is absolutely free of charge, so nothing to pay basically. And Simar is also open on Sundays from 10 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. BirdLife Malta also manages Adira Nature Reserve, which is open twice a week too, on the Mondays and on the Thursdays, and is open on both Saturdays and Sundays, always from 10 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. If you have any doubts on our opening hours, simply visit our Facebook pages, BirdLife Malta, or Adira Nature Reserve, or Simar Nature Reserve, or Salina Nature Reserve. I'd like to mention also another two sites which BirdLife manages. Salina Nature Reserve, which is open 24/7 when one can have a walk and get information on the salt making process and also enjoy birds. And Foresta 2000, which is an afforestation project in Melliħa. So Simar, as you've seen, we have ringed the sedge warbler, and this is exactly the habitat the sedge warbler loves. So it's reeds and trees, tamarisk trees on the water's edge. There are a number of islands scattered around the reserve, and these provide cover, shelter and food for the migratory birds. Ir-riserva hija magħmula minn numru ta' gżejjer żgħar tajjeb li fuqhom hawn diversi xtieli fosthom tal-bruka, u l-idea ta' dal-ħafna gżejjer żgħar huma li jagħtu iktar artijiet, iktar post fejn l-asafar jistgħu jieklu minn maxtajtiet u jistkennu waqt il-migrazzjoni. L-ilma huwa ovvjament element importantissimu ġo riserva bħal din. L-ilma hawnhekk huwa ilma salmastru li jfisser li fix-xitwa meta tagħmel ix-xita l-ilma isir pjuttost ixaqleb lejn l-ilma ħelu. Fis-sajf però meta l-livell tal-ilma jonqos imma importanti li qatt ma jinxef, tiżdied is-salinità. Għalhekk ikun hawn fluctuation qawwija ħafna fil-kontenut ta' melħ tal-ilma. Sabiħ wieħed jinnota wkoll però li għalkemm jkun hawn differenzi, il-ħuta nazzjonali ta' Malta, il-bużaq, bażikament tgħix hawnhekk u hawn eluf kbar ta' minna. U hija importantissima għal ħafna mill-asafar hawnhekk bħall-irsieset u l-asfur ta' San Martin li jkunu qegħdin jieklu. Illum għamilna di trasmissjoni live minn Facebook, nisperaw li jekk jitjiebu l-affarijiet jekk Alla jrid tkunu tistgħu iżżuru intom stess bil-familji tagħkom.
Fatt għandna xi għalliema li qegħdin jikkummentaw sfortunatament fl-aħħar sena ma stajniex inżuru r-riservi mal-istudenti tagħna.
Eżattament, għax importanti ninnotaw li r-riservi tagħna ma jkunux normalment miftuħ għal pubbliku fil-għodijiet minħabba li kull filgħodu ikonna tfal ta' diversi skejjel kemm minn Malta u kemm minn Għawdex li jżuru biex jagħmlu lezzjoni hawnhekk. Hija parti mill-kurrikulu ta' diversi suġġetti bħal ovvjament il-biology, l-environmental studies, il-social studies, u mod importanti kif iż-żar il-ġenerazzjoni tal-futur nagħmluhom l-għarfien tal-ambjent Malti. It's important to note also that the nature reserves are close to the public in the mornings, based on the fact because every morning during the scholastic year we have school children booked daily at our nature reserves, either as part of their curriculum basically, subjects like social studies, environmental studies and biology, and it's very important that we teach the future generation on the importance of protecting the local environment, which, as we have seen, despite all the limitations we have, is quite rich and interesting. We're closing down this live Facebook stream. We thank you for your time and hope you found this interesting. We remind you that we have another upcoming such stream, this time from the Simar Nature Reserve of Adira, where we'll also be seeing some bird ringing, and given the habitat is slightly different there, maybe we hope for to be able to show you some different bird species. Thank you for taking the time to being with us and hope to catch up with us pretty soon. Ħanalaq naqra bil-Malti, nirringrazzjakom tal-ħin tagħkom dal-għodu, nisperaw li ħadtu gost, hija sfortuna li ma tistgħux tkunu hawn preżenti biex tgawdu tisimgħu l-ħsejjes tan-natura, imma nisperaw li fil-futur qarib inkunu nistgħu nerġgħu niftħu u nilqgħu il-pubbliku. Kemm infakrukom li s-sibt li ġej ser ikonna sezzjoni simili ta' bird ringing mir-riserva tal-Adira fejn il-kollegi tiegħi ser ikunu qegħdin jirringjaw u nisperaw li jkollna forsi xi speċi ta' safar differenti minħabba li l-abitat huwa naqra differenti. Nirringrazzjakom tal-ħin tagħkom.